members of SWAPO Party that came to this press conference, members of the media, comrades and friends. Ours will be a short meeting coming together this afternoon after a very important gathering of the Central Committee of SWAPO Party. With me, I'm accompanied by the Information and Mobilisation Secretary of SWAPO Party, Comrade Nicanor, Hilma. SWAPO! The Secretary, the Deputy Secretary General, Comrade Herunga.
Viva SWAPO Party, viva! Viva! Comrade Secretary General SWAPO Party, viva! Viva! Aluta! Victoria!
The SWAPO Party legal brain. Can I mention their names?
Yes.
Comrade Secretary of Legal Affairs of SWAPO Party, Comrade Hilma Nicanor.
SWAPO!
Comrade Sisana Manje, one of them.
Viva Comrade Sisa, viva! Viva! Sisa, viva! Viva!
Comrade Kundi Beiko.
Viva SWAPO! Viva! Viva SWAPO! Viva! Aluta! Victoria!
Of course, we could not do without the previous Secretary for Legal Affairs of SWAPO Party because, as we are new, he is one of the gurus of SWAPO Party, Comrade Kawana.
Viva SWAPO! Viva SWAPO! Viva leadership! Viva leadership!
Viva AK!
Comrade Media Houses, we appreciate your being here this afternoon. You were told by our president that after the Central Committee will be gathered again, will be called again for a press release as an outcome of the deliberations of the Central Committee of SWAPO Party. The legal brain assisted us as a Central Committee to put our press release on black and white. And on behalf of the Central Committee, the top four, I have just signed it off. Unless there is any other thing, Comrade the Secretary of Legal Affairs, Comrade Hilma, if you do not have anything to tell this gathering, perhaps we can give to the statement to be read by the Information and Mobilisation Secretary of SWAPO Party.
What is important?
All is in order. Thank you. Leadership, all is in order.
Founding President, Father of the Namibian nation, Leader of the Namibian Revolution, long live!
Long live!
Comrade Mvike Punya Pohamba, former President, long live!
Long live!
Our own comrade leader, Comrade Dr. Hage Gottfried Kengo, President of SWAPO Party of the Republic of Namibia, long live!
Long live!
Comrade Vice President of SWAPO Party, Comrade Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah and SWAPO Presidential Candidate come 2024, long live!
Long live!
Sophia Nahango Shandimba, the Secretary General of SWAPO Party, long live!
Long live!
I want to observe the protocol. The Deputy SG, I wanted to observe the protocol for the leader. Thank you very much. I want to, without a waste of any time, attend to the task entrusted upon me, and that is to give to you the SWAPO Party press statement on the outcome of the extraordinary meeting of the SWAPO Party Central Committee held today, Saturday, the 17th June 2023, here in Windhoek, on the recent Supreme Court judgment on the recognition of same-sex marriages for purposes of Section 2, Sub 1C of the Immigration Control Act, which was delivered on 16 May 2023. Our Constitution proclaims that all power shall vest in the people of Namibia, who shall exercise sovereignty through the democratic institutions of state. The SWAPO Party, being a mass-based political party, born and instilled in the crucible of popular and heroic struggle of our independence, is founded on the principle of democracy, solidarity, freedom, social justice, and progress. These principles on which SWAPO Party is founded had propelled it over the years to transform the Namibian society and to establish, sustain, and maintain a peaceful and democratic society. Therefore, it is not surprising that whenever called upon by its members and the public, it is both politically and constitutionally enjoined to respond in a positive and impactful manner. That being the case, when its members and the public voice their concerns on issues of public interest, it is enjoined and obligated to take necessary measures and steps. Over the last 33 years, the SWAPO Party had notably, through its government, taken necessary steps in order not only to make new laws, but also to repeal and modify existing laws that do not serve the public interest. To this effect, various common law principles, rules, and a number of pre-independent acts of parliament had been repealed or modified in terms of Article 66, Sub 2, and Article 140, Sub 1 of the Namibian Constitution, respectively. The Supreme Court of Namibia, in two consolidated appeals, namely Sailor Liles and the Gashu and Ministry of Home Affairs under the case number SA/2022, delivered its judgment on 16 May 2023. The two appeals in which Namibian nationals were married to foreign nationals in same-sex marriages concluded in countries which recognize same-sex marriages, namely South Africa and Germany. The court had to determine, amongst others, whether or not the Ministry of Home Affairs was correct in its refusal to recognize the two foreign nationals in the aforesaid same-sex marriages validly married in a foreign country for purposes of qualifying as spouses of the Namibian same-sex partners as contemplated under Section 2, Sub 1C of the Immigration Control Act number 7 of 1993, which exempts spouses and dependents of Namibian nationals for necessary permits under Chapter 6 of the Immigration Control Act for purposes of entering into a residing in Namibia. The Supreme Court had to decide whether or not the Ministry of Home Affairs was correct in its refusal to recognize the two foreign nationals as spouses to their Namibian same-sex partners who were validly married in countries that recognize same-sex marriages for immigration purposes under Section 2, Sub 1C of the Immigration Control Act number 7 of 1993. The Supreme Court found that the exclusion of foreign partners who are validly married to Namibian citizens in same-sex marriages recognized in foreign countries from the ambit and meaning of the term spouse in Section 2, Sub 1C of the Immigration Control Act infringes those foreign nationals' rights to dignity and equality under the Namibian Constitution. The above finding was made after the Supreme Court concluded that in terms of Namibian law, the validity of a marriage is determined in accordance with the legal requirements of the country where the marriage was concluded. This legal position, according to the Supreme Court, is in accordance with an applicable common law principle, in Latin called lexi loci celebrationis matrimonio, which the court found remains part of the Namibian law. The appellants, both in the High Court and the Supreme Court, challenged the ministry's approach and its refusal to recognize them as spouses of Namibian nationals in marriages validly concluded in countries that recognizes same-sex marriages. The SWAPO Party government, both in High Court, where it succeeded, and in the Supreme Court, where it lost, in accordance with the SWAPO Party long-standing policy on marriage and family, opposed the two cases. Government in the main contended that when regard is held to the Namibian common law, various acts of parliament, and Article 14 of the Namibian Constitution, same-sex marriages are not recognized. In particular, government highlighted in the Supreme Court the fact, although the two foreign nationals were married to Namibian citizens in countries which recognize same-sex marriages, they, as the foreign nationals, would not qualify as spouses in terms of Section 2, subsection 1C of the Immigration Control Act, as qualification would be inconsistent with the Namibian laws and policies. Unfortunately, and yet disconcertingly, notwithstanding the government's spirited opposition to the recognition of those marriages, the Supreme Court, per majority judgment, with one judge dissenting, ruled against government that the ministry's approach to exclude foreign nationals validly married to Namibians in same-sex marriages from the term spouse under Section 2, Sub 1C of the Immigration Control Act infringes their rights. Now, the Supreme Court, therefore, in the end, made an order that both Master Digashu and Ms. Sailor Lides must be regarded as spouses to their Namibian same-sex partners only for purposes of Section 2, Sub 1C of the Immigration Control Act. Because of a great deal of what appears to be confusion over the scope and ambit of the Supreme Court's finding, it is important that we inform our members and the public that the Supreme Court itself, under paragraph 134 of its judgment, pointed out that in view of the fact that marriages are manifold and multifaceted, its judgment only deals with and is only applicable to the recognition of foreign spouses in validly concluded same-sex marriages for purposes of Section 2, Sub 1C of the Immigration Control Act. The Central Committee of SWAPO Party observed that the judgment, when properly considered and read, does not generally recognize same-sex marriages in Namibia, as some seek to portray. It is of limited scope and effect. The Central Committee, in the aftermath of the Supreme Court judgment, as the highest organ of authority between Congresses, and in its customary vigilance over topical issues affecting the nation, immediately decided to discuss and interrogate the nature, import, and effect of the judgment. After the Central Committee extensively discussed the judgment and its effect on the society as a whole, it hereby expresses its grave concern and disappointment over the judgment and the uncertainty and confusion it creates, notwithstanding its confined scope. The Central Committee observed and reiterated that in accordance with an accepted maxim of international law, and as per the sentiments of the Supreme Court in another judgment, the Minister of Home Affairs and Immigration, and Holtman and others, 2022, Namibia has the power as inherent in its sovereignty and essential to its self-preservation and security of its people to forbid and regulate the interests of foreigners within its domain on such conditions as the executive and legislature, not the courts, could prescribe. In this respect, the Central Committee further observed that there are several laws in Namibia overwhelmingly confirming that marriage as contemplated under Article 14, Sub 1, is a marriage between a man and a woman. This legislative policy and constitutional state of affairs also confirm the SWAPO Party marriage policy, both before and after independence to date. The Central Committee recalled that the right for men and women of full age to marry and found a family was deliberately and consciously at the instance and insistence by SWAPO Party during the deliberations at the Constituent Assembly, included in the Constitution as it represented its marriage and family policy as codified on 1st December 1977. The Central Committee, notwithstanding its concern and disappointment over the judgment, reiterates and reaffirms the SWAPO Party's commitment to constitutional provisions under Article 78, Sub 3, that is, non-interference with the judiciary and the protection of the dignity and effectiveness of courts. The Central Committee, having carefully considered and reflected on the matter, therefore resolved to direct government to immediately take executive and legislative steps aimed at introducing a Namibian law complying the definition of the word spouse into the Immigration Control Act, which definition will inevitably modify, not repeal, the common law principle applied by the Supreme Court only for purposes of Section 2, Sub 1C of the Immigration Control Act, of the Act, my apologies. Finally, while the SWAPO Party government takes above directed statutory remedial steps, the SWAPO Party hereby strongly condemns and repudiates all kinds of immoral and indecent acts and other associated acts that are either inconsistent with the Namibian laws or against public policy. In this respect, SWAPO Party directs its government to enforce all laws in force that are aimed at preventing and combating such acts. This was as communicated. To me.
Thank you, Comrade Secretary for Information and Mobilisation, Comrade Hilma Nicanor. Now that you have read the stand of the Central Committee of SWAPO Party on behalf of the rank and file of SWAPO Party and the community there at large, I think the message of the press release is very clear. However, there should always be a room for questions by the media houses, and we'll entertain three. So now media houses, when you are going to ask your questions, make sure that you are touching where it needs to be touched. So that at least you get it right when you are going to report. Don't ask nyaka-nyakas. Ask valid questions because you only have 3 chances. And that is very limited for one to play around with that. Having said that, may I now again give a propose a hand of applause. Having done so, members of the media, over to you for your 3 questions. If it was not clear,
No question.
it's clear.
Very good.